Welcome to The Teacher's Story. I'm Jackie Scully. This is a podcast to elevate teacher voice. In this program, you will hear teachers sharing their journey into this profession and their ideas for education. I'm kicking it off Teacher Appreciation Week, which starts May 2nd. This is about honest, vulnerable, inspiring storytelling. It's a time and a space for teachers to share their ideas for the future of education. Teachers are beautiful beings who give their heart and soul to their community. They're innovators, they're inspirational, not only to children, but to the people around them. And they deserve to share their voice. So welcome to The Teacher's Story. Enjoy. Hi, welcome to The Teacher's Story. This is Jackie Scully, and today I have Kimberly Gawne with us. She is out of Canada. She is an educator and has her business star students, as you can see in her background. And it is a tutoring and educational service for parents looking for alternative education choices if they are not satisfied with the public school system. And I love your tagline, progress without politics. So love it. So excited for this conversation today. Thank you, Kimberly, for being here.
Thank you, first and foremost, Jackie, for having me here. I'm really excited for it too. I know that we vibe on quite a few different levels, so it's really exciting to be able to vibe on the education level in particular.
Yes, thank you. So what originally got you into education? And I think you had some time just in like kind of the traditional model before you started your business, right?
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, in terms of what got me into education, I'd have to thank my father for that. That was one thing. He wasn't a teacher in a public school, but he was what I might call an alternative educator, teaching people about finances and how to manage them, that sort of thing. But from a very young age, that's where my inspiration sort of came from, because I remember, as a kid coming home from school, crying, typically because of math. And my dad, sitting down, explaining things to me in various different ways, to try to make sure that I understood that, and he didn't, and I understood whatever concept it was that we were talking about, and he wouldn't stop explaining until I actually understood the concept, right? Like he just kept going, persistence wise, which is one of the qualities you would know, which is one of the qualities that makes a great teacher is persistence, right? And so that kind of started my journey along like why I wanted to be a teacher and what kind of led me into being a teacher. Um, of course, when you think about teaching, you think about being an educator, where most people's brains go is immediately to a public school educator, right? Because that's kind of that's just the phenomena, right? That's just kind of how things work. Um, and so yeah, so I just kind of I went well, I not kind of I did go through. I went through teachers college. I went through university first to get my 4 years for my BA, and then I went to 2 years of teachers college. And then from there, yes, I mean, I guess I was teaching in my practicum, in my co-op. I actually graduated in 2020, in April of 2020, if you can believe that. So if you remember the way that the world was, it was just not a foot that I wanted to start on in terms of where my career was going to be, right? It's different if you're in that environment already and you've been there, as a veteran teacher for 10, 15, 20 years. And that's totally understandable. Everybody has their own choices. For me, I knew that it wasn't going to work. starting that on that foot. It just was not, because I was up to here with the levels of frustration, with just all of the extra stuff going on. And so here I was with, 6 years of education under my belt, and I've spent all this money for these degrees that I'm now like, well, I don't know if this is what I can do anymore. And so that's where Star Students came from, because I said, well, there's no reason that I can't do it on my own, right?
Yeah. And so I think you coming into education, like starting your career in 2020, was that pivotal moment. Usually that's a question I ask in a little later on of like, what was the pandemic like for you? And like, how did that, evolve into what you're doing now? So we're like already at that point. I could not
Right.
imagine graduating and thinking I'm going to go into teaching in 2020. Like that was already my 18th year teaching or
Right.
17th year.
Right.
So I was in it for a long time. And it was still one of the most challenging things I have ever gone through as a teacher. And now that we're
Yeah.
on the other side of it, it's like we can't really do education the same way that we did before. Like it definitely
Right.
was this like pivotal moment of like, what are we doing? And so that's
Right.
why I love how we connect it, because I very much connect with your philosophy and what you're doing with STAR students. So yeah, tell us how out of 2020 and creating this business, how all that came to be, and then, what you saw with like parents and what they were yearning for and what they were needing and why this business really needed to happen.
Of course, yeah. Well, I know first of all, like that's one of the things that I love about how we connected. There's so many educators, yourself included, who realize like, hey, this is not something that's working anymore. Maybe there were kind of some hints before the pandemic as to like, okay, things are really not not doing too well, right? And then, after everything that happened, we're sitting here like, well, we really can't, like you just said, we really can't do education the same way. And so that's one of the reasons I love how we connected over that, right? We really can't do education the same way. Um, in terms of how Star Students started, so I mean, I just started with tutoring, because that was what I knew, right? That was how I knew how to operate. That was the familiar ground. And it wasn't a forever plan. It was just kind of, okay, well, this is kind of the natural way of things. And so I started out with tutoring, and it was just me. And then very quickly, I had people actually like that summer, so that like 2, 3 months later, I had people asking for homeschooling services. Because here I am as a teacher who's gone through the system to be educated as a teacher, to know all of the curriculum, to have all of those details and all of the extra, what I call fluff, um, everything else that came with it, right, in teachers college. Um, and I had parents asking for homeschooling services. And so I said, okay, well, this is something that I can't do on my own, right? So at that point, I made it an official business, opened it up as Star Students. It took me a little bit to find the right people, and to find the right teachers. You have to consider quite a few things when you're hiring people for teaching. It's a non-negotiable that all of our teachers have a BA in whatever their expertise is, and then a B.Ed, because if people are hiring for private education, you should have the appropriate credentials, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though, this is the irony, even though you're operating outside the system, as alternative education, you do need to know the system well enough to be
Mm-hmm.
able to still make that equivalent, right? And so a lot of parents that we serve, a lot of our clients are very much comfortable with that because they like the idea of having private teachers that have chosen to, for various reasons, step outside the system and work privately on their own. And so that's how Star Students came about. It was very much an organic. I saw the need. I was actually asked for the need directly by quite a few people. And so we opened up our own. That was in January of 2021 was when the business was officially open. Um, Things continued with tutoring and whatnot. The homeschooling section of things came in by 2022. So by the summer of 2022, fall of 2022, was when we first started running our homeschooling programs. Great success. All the kids who were with us last year have come back this year, and we're actually in the
Wonderful.
middle of this for this year. Yeah.
That's great. I like that this just happened organically, because to me, that always feels like it's just meant to be, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have to push anything. I think because you realized early on in that spring 2020, like this is not for me going to the traditional model in the public school setting. So you set that
Mm-hmm.
intention and then things just kind of like came to you. And I think that's what happens. It's like, you know what you want. You're not sure what that looks like, and then things just come in and then it just flows naturally. And I think what you're creating and the fact that it's growing is wonderful, because I see it here in the United States as well. I went
Mm-hmm.
to an alternative education conference in June 2023 and learned lots about homeschooling, microschooling, how more and more parents are pulling their kids out of the traditional model because they maybe want it to fit their schedule. Maybe they're parents that are at home and also like to travel or do other things, and having maybe education online helps with that. But a lot of them do want to have it be more individualized, which is something we'll talk about. They want the individual attention. They want their child to feel like they can have agency, they can explore. and they're not kind of feeling like it's this one size fits all curriculum that either the state is creating, the teacher themselves or department is creating with whatever their perspective is. So again, kind of getting into like progress without politics. There's been a lot coming out of 2020 and 2021 with the whole, what are these like schools teaching our children, right? And parents feeling like, are we on board with that? Or like, we would like to have more, freedom and flexibility, and having our children be able to explore and ask their own questions in like a critical thinking way, and not feel like there's this packaged curriculum that is kind of being forced on kids. And so kind of going into that, like maybe you want to talk about a little bit more about the way you kind of run your school, your homeschooling, your curriculum, how maybe parents or students have agency or they're part of it as well. Because I think you give a lot of kind of like that agency to them as well.
Yes, 100%. 100%. And so I mentioned, I'll talk about this a little bit in a second, but I mentioned that we started our first homeschooling program in 2022, like in the fall of 2022 was when we started. And that was our first one. So this is our second year running this program. And like I said, all the kids have come back. One of the big things that we really do stress in schools, and I like in working with our program and with working with the education that we provide, is making sure that we give the parents the choice, and that we give the kids the choice of curriculum. So when I sit down and I say, okay, so this is what needs to be done for myself, because I still teach. I don't just run the business. I still teach because that's what I want to do. That's what I love. And so when I sit down and I plan out the curriculum, right? I mean, I let my teachers, have a say in what curriculum we should use. I then take that curriculum to the parents and I say, here are our professional recommendations, because your child needs to know A, B, and C in subjects D, E, and F, right? And to make sure that they're academically on par with their public school peers, right? So you're homeschooling, but you're still getting the academic section of the curriculum, so that you're not shutting any opportunities, you're not shutting off any doors to your kids. That was something that I decided to do because of the fact that when people and parents were talking to me, one of their concerns was, well, I can't homeschool my kid because A, I don't know the curriculum, like they don't have the knowledge because they haven't gone through the education. They're like, where do I start? Oh, with the 600-page document? Okay, great. Right? With all the expectations and stuff. So they can definitely do it themselves, but it's a lot of work. And so what we did was make sure that we're qualifying those curriculum pieces that we're choosing that match best with the family. For actual curriculum choice, the kids are very much involved as well, right? We take it to the parents. We say, here's our professional recommendations. Then the parents will go through, make sure everything is good and everything aligns with what they're looking for. There's certain things that they teach in public school that we at Star Students don't touch as topics. We leave them for their like dinner table conversations rather than school conversations, right? And so with that comes a little bit of agency, like I mentioned before, with the parents. Those same parents will then come to me and ask professional advice as to how to approach those topics with their kids. And we'll sit there and have a discussion. It's not me telling them what to say or what to do. We'll sit there, have a discussion. What is your family comfortable with? Is that something that your child is developmentally capable of absorbing, right? And these are the parents that realistically, parents know their children better than any other person on the planet. So far be it from me as an educator to say, well, this is what you should teach your child, right? Now I can provide my recommendations. I can say, this is the way that these are different ways you can approach subjects. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the parents are the primary, not the primary educator, but the primary voice of agency for the child. So that's a little bit about how we make sure, just with our elite homeschooling program, that's a little bit about how we make sure that we're providing the parents and the kids with agency and with choice to be able to enjoy their schooling.
I love that, because I think we've gotten too far away from that kind of collaboration for a long time. And actually, like, long time, like, you think about the whole institution, like the whole system hasn't really been about that collaboration. If you think about eons ago, the whole idea of it takes a village to raise a child was
Yeah.
about family and other elders and members. We think elders, maybe other teachers, coming together in support, in collaboration to help guide that child. And that's kind of like you're bridging that relationship, because at least in the United States, we've seen battleground, right, between
Right.
teachers, school boards, and parents. And that doesn't do any service to the child at all. It creates more
No.
problems, it creates friction. Um, we have teachers leaving, right, the school system because of those types of conflicts, and also just the pressure of the system itself. And
Yep.
there's more and more parents, again, pulling their kids from schools because they don't feel they have a voice. They don't feel they have support. And you're right, like, the parents do know their child the best. It's their children, and it should be a team effort. And, I like this approach of, like, I'm the educator, I have the professional background, I can give my professional advice and suggestions, but at the end of the day, we're having a conversation with the parents, and they have agency, and also the students have choice in what they want to learn or how they want to go about it. And I like this idea of certain topics that could be hot button topics that eventually will present themselves in schools, and we see it all the time, that, like, how are we approaching that with the child and with parents involved, and not just the teacher saying, well, this is the way I see things and this is how I'm going to talk to your child about it. And that creates a lot of friction and problems, because then the other voices feel like they're just getting kind of spoon-fed information, and they don't really know how to come back and say anything. Because I have a couple students, in my space now, that feel like some things they don't know how to raise their voice about because they feel like the outlier. And I just don't think those are the spaces we want to create in any type of educational school system, whether that's homeschooling, micro school, regular traditional school. Like, children should feel safe to ask questions, to be curious, to have those conversations, and know that there's going to be multiple perspectives, but multiple people supporting them in asking those questions. So yeah, anything else you wanted to maybe go off and share about that too?
No, I just really like where you're coming from with that. I know that a lot of our parents have asked, not even have asked, this was just something that I saw as an educator um, in the public school systems, especially when I was in teachers college. I'm sure when you went to teachers college, having been a teacher for 19 years
Yeah.
now, it was much different, right? As much the same as when I went to university. Like, I hear from people in university and I'm like, what? There's new policies, there's new, like, they change things, right? Um, so when I went to teachers college, it was very much politicized. There was nothing necessarily about how, not nothing, I should say, there were precisely 2 classes out of the 40 that I took in my 2 years of teachers college, not excluding the practicum and the co-op, because that's the hands-on experience and I loved being in the classroom. But in terms of the classes that I was required to take, there were maybe 2 out of 40, coincidentally taught by the same professor, I still remember his name, about actually how to plan curriculum and actually how to, like, the gist of actually being a teacher, and how you plan your subjects, how you plan your day, like the practicalities, right, of how to be a teacher. You would think that's what the majority of teachers college is supposed to be about. No, the rest of those classes that I took were about how to teach from a certain framework. And it was all the same sort of framework, right? And that was where I really had a problem, because I was like, if this is what I'm expected to do, like, this is not in the best interest of the child. This is not in the best interest of the parent. What happens to, like you said, what happens to all those other voices? All of those other opinions, all those other perspectives? Do we just ignore them? Like, how are we as an educator supposed to teach from only that one perspective, right? That's not something that was not something that I was okay with. And so I resonate with that when you say that, like, children should feel safe to be able to express opinions and to be able to talk freely, and learn how to engage respectfully, because other people are going to have different opinions. Other people are going to have different perspectives. Oftentimes, I find in a classroom setting, you don't get that for a variety of reasons. And I don't think that I don't think that hardly any of that is the teacher's fault.
Hmm.
It's a much different environment when you have a class of, one teacher and 2 or 3 or 4 students, or even one-on-one, right? As opposed to you have one teacher and you have 25 to 30 to 40. It's a different environment in the classroom, right? And so that kind of opens up a little bit of a conversation about smaller class sizes.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, right? Even then, I do think that a lot of the same challenges remain in traditional education.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you're going to get a certain kind of tone depending on what college you go to. And it was different when I went to college. I graduated 2004. I would say I'm social sciences education, and that was like my first degree. And then I got a master's in education. So it really was a lot of like content and then also practicum and, how to plan lessons. But I could see it now being very much more politicized, especially being a social sciences teacher and depending on what school you go to and kind of the mindset of those professors. And college students, like we see now happening in 2023 with everything from the fall, are very much influenced by the school and the professors who are teaching them. And then it's like shaping that mindset. And it's also for the teacher not to feel like they're being spoon-fed a certain perspective, because I think being a quality educator means you need to be open-minded and you have to make a space for multiple perspectives. I think it's a responsibility that we have. I go back to, we use Socratic seminar in our history classes, which I really love because it's all about taking a text that could have various opinions and various perspectives, and the students, with you facilitating, helping to have them lead the conversation and approach the text from their various viewpoints and asking questions, but responding respectfully to one another, and being able to go kind of deep into that instead of like the teacher saying, here's the text that I believe is correct, and I want you to just like regurgitate or like answer these questions that I created for you. So I think as much putting it into the students' hands, and developmentally, I like how you have that conversation with parents about different topics and what is developmentally appropriate and how we approach those topics. Because like I teach 11th and 12th grade, they're young adults. They can have those conversations and have those Socratic seminars because they're kind of developmentally ready for that. But elementary school, lower school, how are we scaffolding and creating, those spaces where they can ask these questions, ask curious questions, but we're also like, where do we go developmentally with that? So I think it's very important that we think about the age group and the kind of conversations we're having with them.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share just about like your day to day, what it looks like, the types of families that you're working with, their feedback, their testimonials about, of course, they're coming back to you. So it's definitely been a success. And anything else that you just see in the way you're approaching education and how it might advance in maybe, I don't know, breaking the mold a little bit in our system that we have.
Yeah. Well, stepping outside of the system is definitely something that a lot of parents want to do, but they don't really know where to start, right? So I always say one of my biggest tips, or one of my biggest points that I stress. You mentioned earlier, actually, I found that funny. You said eons ago, eons. That was the phrase you used. Eons ago, we had this mentality of it takes a village to raise a child. That wasn't eons ago. It was only like maybe 100 years, 150 years, right? It feels like eons for sure because education has changed so much, right? But that, I think that really does still stand true, right? It takes a village to raise a child. And so the perspective that Star Students is founded on is that we are here as teachers and as educators to assist you and to help you, but you absolutely must have other people around, right? And I really, within the homeschooling community, this is one of the biggest things that I talk about is you have to have a tribe around you. You have to have, and I don't mean a tribe as in, like the general sense of like what you might think of eons ago being like a tribe running across the plains. Like that's not what I mean, right? I mean, you have to have people around you. You have to have a support system. And they don't all necessarily have to think the same way or have the same opinions or whatever. But your tribe as a parent should be other parents who are also looking for the best interest for their child. And you mentioned before with educators, it's important for us educators to keep an open mind, also important for parents, especially if they are the ones who are educating or educating in some way with their children, right? Whether they're doing partial subjects, whether they're hiring it out, whether they're hiring out part of what they don't want to teach, right? Whatever the situation is, making sure that you keep an open mind and making sure that you explore different options and making sure that you obviously do what's in the best interest for your child and for your family, right? Because that's really what it does come down to. When you think about, when you take the grand scheme of things, you take the politics out of it, the difference of opinions and whatever, you're acting in the best interest of your child. And as long as you can look in the mirror at night with yourself and say, I did a good job today with my kid, you're doing a good job then.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
The integrity has to be there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
All people. Yes. And children can see that. Children are smarter than we give them credit for.
And
They
we
are
give them
very
credit for
intuitive.
100%. They pick up
Yes,
on things like that. They
everything.
pick up on things so quickly.
They're very intuitive, especially when they're very young. And I love when like a child can call out something that's like not right or like just speak truth. And I'm like,
Right.
this is like, we should be, learning from them.
When they
Because
don't necessarily have that filter all the time and they say something
right.
that's like, okay, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think they know when they're adults in their life have the best interest for them and they have that integrity. They can see it, they could feel it. And I think they know when it's like being phony or people are faking it or they have an agenda, right? So any other thoughts that you want to share about like just how you see education now or in the future, or what you would like to see maybe expand even just from your own business, or maybe this is, influencing others to do what you're doing?
Yeah. If I had my way, most kids would be homeschooled. If not all kids. Let me say all kids. Let's go crazy. Let's dream big. If I had my way, all kids would be homeschooled, and the current factory model of education would not exist. It would be completely wiped off the face of the earth. But that's me. I'm a little radical. I definitely see things, and especially now, I see things moving in a much more positive direction, in a much more trending upwards, in terms of alternative learning and homeschooling, and parents also being involved. Even I'm seeing a huge change in even parents who are, for whatever reason, keeping their kids in public school. Some parents may work factory jobs, they may be out of the house, or whatever it is. There's lots of reasons that parents feel that they can't homeschool, and a lot of them are valid, right? You have to kind of build a lifestyle around homeschooling. But with that said, I'm seeing a huge upward trend in even the parents who are choosing to keep their kids in public school are way more involved than they were before 2020. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that education came home, right? Where everybody tried to do online learning, and the school boards did not handle that well, but that's a different topic. But education came home, right? And it didn't look very good to a lot of the parents. And so now, even when their kids are back in school, they're taking a much bigger interest. They're following up with the teachers. They're trying to support the teachers in what they can offer, what they can do, kind of how they can tag team or partner or whatever. I'm seeing a huge uptrend in that, even for parents who are keeping their kids in school. I'm also seeing a huge uptrend in parents being like, nope, that's enough, and yanking their kids from school because they're looking for other options. You mentioned microschooling, there's unschooling, obviously there's homeschooling. There's tons of different ways for people to educate their kids and still give them the same opportunities or even better opportunities than kids who are in public school, right? Than the children who are in public school. Lots of different ways to do things. I think people are becoming much more aware now, and they're actually taking action. I would say within the next 5 years, there's going to be a massive shift, if not sooner, if not sooner than 5 years. Give it 5 years max, right? If you think about the education landscape in 2020 and how it is now in 2023, right? It's only been what, 3 years? Not even. Give it another 5. I see a huge shift coming. A huge shift coming.
I agree. everything's ramping up too, and it's because we need it to. So
Yes.
it's like an energy of like we need it to, and there's a lot of, I think, I love this idea that there's more parents on board, because I think we've seen in, before the pandemic, there was more of that disconnect, and children need their parents to be involved. I think it helps with their mental health. It helps with their whole
100.
like view of their own self-esteem and everything. And so in a way, the pandemic, with education coming home, as horrible and crazy as the pandemic was, in a way that brought some light to things of like what we need to fix and what we need to, how we need to include everyone. So yeah,
Mhm.
I can see alternative education exploding. I mean, it already is, but like off the map in the next couple of years. And I wonder, this is my wonder, of how the public education system and just other traditional models, like I'm in a private school, but it's still like the traditional kind of schedule of public school system, how that's
Mhm.
going to respond. So that's my wonder, is that in the next few
It's not
years, they can't
it,
keep going the way they're going.
it's not going down without a fight,
I
right?
know,
It's not
I
going
know.
down without a fight. Um, is my opinion. That's curious. I never thought about how the system would respond. So that's a curious point.
Yeah,
I've always kind of thought, well, like that's like they're gonna go down, but they're gonna go down, but they're not gonna go down without a fight, right?
yeah,
That's kind of
yeah.
been my mindset. I never thought about how they would maybe choose to respond.
I
Um,
know.
and that kind of brings me to the next sort
Yeah,
of wondering, maybe your brain is
yeah.
going too, if they respond, and like depending on how they respond, is that going to be enough,
Mm, mm,
right?
I don't
However
know.
they choose to respond,
Right.
is that going to be enough to convince parents that the public school system is the way to go? I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't think so. I think that the public school model, the factory model of education, let's call it that, because it's not necessarily just public schools. The factory model of education, I think, needs to undergo some immense changes, and it's just not working anymore.
Hmm.
It's just not working anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that there are people in the public school system that are high up enough to think
Mm.
creatively outside the box to come up with
Yes.
a
That's what
solution,
I was
like on a
thinking.
mass scale, right?
Yeah.
On a mass scale, right? At Star Students, and I'll say this from firsthand experience, like homeschooling is a lot of work. There's a reason why like teachers is a like being a job, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
there's a reason that that's the case. If you are doing homeschooling or a type of homeschooling or unschooling or alternative learning where you're personalizing education on
Mm.
a massive scale, how do you do that? I'm a creative thinker, but I don't know
Mm.
that I could come up with a way to do that on a massive scale. It would take a lot
Yeah.
more resources
I
than
think
I
the
that are
response
difficult.
first is going to be, oh, let these people go and do their thing. This is never going to work on like a large scale system. We
Mm,
still in the
right.
mindset of like, we still need to have transcripts and college or credits to get into college, and the colleges aren't changing. So we got to keep it the status quo. I think that's going to be the speech for a while. But eventually, as more and more and more are leaving, teachers and families, because there's both,
Hmm.
um,
Yes.
they either collapse or they are forced. I don't think it's going to be like inspired, but forced to maybe do it a different way. And like I published a book this fall, and at the end of my book, I write about just a simple framework of a curriculum that could be infused in like a advisory program or a, I don't know, psychology or theology or community service, life skills class or something. And then just an idea of a new schedule, which is not groundbreaking. It's nothing like it's going to totally alter the system, but it's like a way in to maybe start thinking of like how to try to transform it a little bit. And I still think people look at that like, no, that's never going to work. And it's like, it's not even that. It's like people who aren't even radical, even if you come
It's
up
not
with
a
just a
question
slight,
anymore.
like a slight twist of something that maybe you can embed within the system, and people are like, no, I don't see that happening. We have too many subjects we have to teach. We have too many things we have to do. You can't make a half day of school and then they go and do like experiential learning. I'm like, why not? I mean, they do it in different countries. Like I know in Germany, And I've talked to some other teachers throughout Europe that like by the time they get to high school, like entrepreneurship, building community service projects, like maybe
Business
having a half
classes,
day.
yeah.
Yeah, it's already happening. And I don't know why, because it's funny how Canada and the United States seems like we're very much on like the same page when it comes to that factory model that they just don't want to let go of. But I think it's going to be interesting to see in the next like few years how many people leave and what the response is. Yeah,
And
it's
what
just
the
something
response
that
is. That's
Mhm.
it's going to be interesting. And this is the thing is that if you're not my dad always used to say something that is it's a little saying and it's very applicable to a lot of situations. He used to say if Bob has a problem with everybody is not the problem. It's
Mm,
Bob, right? Put the school system, the traditional school system in there instead of Bob, right?
yeah,
So eventually change is coming. It just
yeah,
depends on how fast people get fed up and people leave,
yes,
right?
yeah,
And how fast people realize that this isn't working for my child anymore. This isn't working for my family anymore. This isn't
yeah,
in the best interest of myself, my partner, my kids, my dog, right? Like it's just not working anymore. We need a
yeah.
change. We need something different. Um, I will say you said something curious just now, so I'll maybe like leave you with this final point. You said, I don't know why Canada and the US are the way that they are. I think that it has a lot to do. The reason that we hang on so hard to the factory model of education is because in Canada and the US, we are so busy all the time. Go, 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 all the
Mm,
time. Like we don't stop to really talk to people. I mean, we're talking, but we don't really stop to talk, to engage, to have meaningful conversations, to sit down and have 15, 20 minutes of a coffee with somebody in a cafe or
mm,
whatever, right? So we're in this idea of because we're so busy, well, then my lifestyle is not um conducive
mm,
to including my children in my day to day because I'm so busy, right? And
mm,
that's one of the biggest differences I find with alternative education of any sort. A lot of parents include their kids in it, like their kids are part of their day to day stuff,
mm.
not just a 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. They're
Yeah,
part of day to day, whether that's from noon on, whether that's the morning and then they do a couple hours of school somewhere else, whatever it is, there's a lot more involvement
mm.
because your kids are with you when you're doing any sort of alternative learning.
I love that. Yeah, so true. We're very, very busy. They always say, like, especially in America, I'm sure, Canada, we're overworked
Yeah.
and we don't appreciate downtime. We don't really want to have downtime.
Downtime. What's downtime?
What's downtime?
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
that model of productivity, productivity,
Mhm.
productivity. And I would even say the UK is very much the same too, because when I talk to teachers from the UK, it's like
Australia is
even
pretty
more,
close.
yeah, that traditional
Yeah.
model. Well, it all comes
Hmm.
from the UK.
This is true. This is
This
very
is
true. If
all
you trace back through
true.
history. Yeah, if you trace back through history. I'm a history major, so like, yeah, that's
Yeah, me
100%.
too. Oh my gosh, that's
Uh-huh.
so funny. Well,
That's
thank you
something.
so
See, that's
much.
another reason you get along so well.
I know, I know. History teachers unite.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for coming on the show,
Of course.
and your insights are wonderful. You are stepping into the new and you're doing it and you are successful. So, I mean, right here is a wonderful example that this is the change that can happen and it works. So, anything you want to share contact wise about how my listeners can find you, website, other information, I'll plug it in the show notes that you would
For
like to
sure.
share.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, fastest way to get a hold of me or I suppose be able to contact me, you can email me. So that's Kimberly@starstudents.co. Jackie said she's got it in the show notes, so perfect. Or if you just want to check out Star Students, if you Google Star Students, so it'll come right up, or any sort of search engine. But if you're a person who likes to type in URLs, it's www.starstudents.co. That's .co on both counts. It's not .com. Got to be different because we're alternative. So that was the idea behind the web address and the email address and everything else. Yeah, that would be the fastest and then the quickest way to get a hold of me with crew contact.
Thank you so much. That will all be hyperlinked in the show notes. So you can go right to Kimberly's email or website to learn more about Star Students. I love it. Thank you for sharing
Thank
all of this
you.
today.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Jackie. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.
And I look forward to this growing connection, collaboration in the future. I think we're like-minded individuals and see how we can keep changing education. So this is great. I love this connection.